Sup guys, it's been a while since Mecklenburg and Hakuho have been available, both of whom being heavy armor specialists, but they don't work too well together. Contrary to what many conspiracy theorists claim, the newest meta fight is not always tailored toward the most recently released UR ship, so we still haven't had a straightforward heavy armor boss fight that would allow either of them to display their full potential. Since Hakuho was released after Mecklenburg, I've seen a lot of speculation about Mecklenburg having been dethroned before she has ever even seen any use, and that is the question I want to answer in this video. The two main fleets I'm interested in comparing are Mecklenburg, Bismarck's Way, Lion, and Hakuho, Amagi, Shinano. I would consider these main fleets to be the highest damaging that feature Mecklenburg and Hakuho, but I'll also go over some caveats and alternatives at the end. The most straightforward way that I could think of to test them was against Arizona meta. This fight is very dangerous for the Vanguard, forcing you to run a high-speed Vanguard to survive somewhat consistently, but she doesn't do much of anything to affect the main fleet in any way. Therefore, the performance of the Vanguards that are used in this fight would not translate well to other fights, but the main fleet performance should be quite typical. Since she's a relatively old meta fight, she has much lower evasion than the bosses of today, so even when I don't bring any damage in the Vanguard, and I mean that literally, the main fleets that I'm testing are still able to consistently one-shot her. As a result, I had to adapt by testing at most 2 main fleet ships at a time, and then adding up the damage together. I still always sortied the full main fleet though, but I would give one ship gimped equipment to make sure the boss would at least survive, so you can see how much damage was being dealt fully by each ship I was testing. By gimped equipment, I would for example remove their auxiliaries like catapults and secondary guns from the battleships, and give them equipment with the exact same cooldowns but dealt much less damage, so that I could maintain the same outcomes for the other ships in the fleet. Let's first take a look at the full loadout of the Hakuho fleet. In general, just assume everything is maxed out. I gave them all aimed torpedo bombers plus Tenrai, which is pretty standard. I made sure to give Hakuho the strongest torpedo bomber on her 3rd slot, since it's the strongest slot out of all the carriers. We also only have one, so when I tested the other 2 carriers, and gimped Hakuho's equipment, I didn't cheat by giving Amagi the Ryuseikai in her 3rd slot because Hakuho wasn't using it, or something like that. In terms of the optimization of the torpedo bombers, I was somewhat arbitrary in choosing what to put where, but I did make sure I didn't use any Saiyuns unnecessarily since I'm going for 3 strikes, and I also wanted Hakuho to not go first. If you want to see my testing, the raw footage of the runs will be linked in the description. So first, I ran only Hakuho with a full loadout 5 times, and then I ran Amagi and Shinano with full loadouts 5 more times, and then I added them together. For this fleet and loadout in particular, all the airstrikes nailed the boss when she was standing still, so there shouldn't be inconsistencies in physical hit rate. Looking at the results, Hakuho dealt just shy of 800k damage per run, and in total, the main fleet would have killed the boss on every run. Keep in mind that the 5 trials for Hakuho were separate trials from the other 2, which were together, and the purpose is to see exactly how much damage they deal without overkill. Since the hit rate was consistent and the boss didn't have much evasion, the variance was also very low. Moving on to the Mecklenburg fleet. First of all, I don't even have 3 Mecklenburg guns to test the fleet in its full form, even if I wanted to. So instead I put the 381 on Bismarck first, and then on Lion after, for the 2 sets of 5 runs, since that gun has the exact same cooldown as the Mecklenburg gun. For both sets of trials, I had a full loadout on Mecklenburg. Mecklenburg dealt more damage when Bismarck had the Mecklenburg gun, which makes sense since there's a good chance Bismarck applies armor break with the AP gun before Mecklenburg fires, increasing her damage by up to 8% versus Bismarck using an HE gun. Looking at Mecklenburg's average damage, it still exceeds 700k, which is impressive, but lower than that of Hakuho. She does have a 5% damage taken increase debuff, which increases to 10% with Bismarck's Black Hole, so her contribution is probably about the same. Looking at the total damage, it's pretty much the same. The timing for 4 salvos doesn't line up with when Arizona stops moving, but for battleships, having Bismarck's Black Hole and Eldridge's Slow is enough to make it quite consistent as well. The two fleets turned out to be surprisingly balanced with each other, at least in this context where both fleets can land their attacks evenly and without Vanguard ships in play. When it comes to what each main fleet contributes to the rest of the fleets, i.e. the Vanguard ships, Shinano provides universal debuffs, as do Lion and Mecklenburg, while Amagi provides extra torpedo damage that would benefit ships like Kazagumo and Unzen, so they're pretty close in that aspect too. The sample size is quite small at 5 runs each, but the workload is doubled since I have to test the ships separately, and I'm not really looking to iron out a few percentage points of difference. Rather, I just wanted to see if there is a significant gap between the two fleets, which there clearly isn't. If one fleet is capable of one-shotting the boss, then odds are the other would be able to as well. I think that the results should translate well to other heavy armor fights that don't favor either 3-strike or 4-strike patterns, because the carriers lose a lot going for 4 strikes, while there's no reason for the battleships to not go for 4 strikes. Now, when it comes to Vanguard options in a realistic fleet, on one hand, the carrier fleet will likely run Kazagumo, while the battleship fleet will have access to Trafalgar. Their impacts would be quite close as well if I had to guess. Ideally, I would like to run a battleship with 2 carriers to make use of both of them, but it's kinda hard because battleships with the Mecklenburg gun are naturally going to be a lot faster than carriers with aimed torpedo bombers and Tenrais. Aside from those two though, Eldridge and Z-52 are just universally good options for both fleets, depending on what it is that you need. And then Plymouth would be good buffing Mecklenburg's damage, while Unzen and Ibuki would be nice for their torpedo damage, buffed further by Amagi. Looking at some of the other main fleet options, Soyuz would be a strong contender for both fleets, having powerful carrier buffs and giving the carrier fleet the ability to make use of Trafalgar, or replacing Bismarck's Way and providing extra slows for the battleship fleet if it's needed. In the case that a full route is necessary, Nakimov and Implacable are still there. Vanguard should be a solid option as well if paired with Lion and Mecklenburg, and Musashi has potential, but her inability to make use of Mecklenburg gun is holding her back a lot right now. She has to resort to either Izumo gun, which is a lot weaker, or the Yamato gun, which does not sync with any of the other ships. Until that changes, she likely has no place in the best anti-heavy fleets. Anyway, I think that should answer the question about which is stronger. It seems that, at least for now, they're pretty much tied, but who knows what will happen in just a couple months' time. We might get a Northern Parliament event in February, and then maybe we'll get a Rainbow Skip bomber, which could put the IJN carriers ahead, or maybe a new Northern Parliament carrier that specializes against heavy armor and then power creeps both Hakuho and Mecklenburg at the same time. Who knows? For now, they're both the queens of heavy armor, although Mecklenburg is no slouch against medium either, while Hakuho is... yeah. Alright, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.